So South Park makes fun of religion a lot. Now, this is no secret to anyone that's watched the show a decent amount. They've covered just about every major religion you can. In fact, it's canon in the show that all of the major religious figures of the world work together to fight crime. But there's one religious group that Matt and Trey target more frequently and with more enthusiasm than just about any other group. Jews.
Stereotyping Jews is terrible.
But their second favorite religious target is, of course, the Mormons.
Would you rather go to war or have a sip of coffee?
Definitely war, because my values prohibit me from drinking coffee, so I just think war is like a better option.
Now, for a lot of people, this may be a pretty unfamiliar topic. Mormons make up less than 2% of the US population, and outside of the US, they're practically non-existent. I honestly can't remember if I've ever even met a Mormon in my life. Where I'm from, the religious people that come knocking on your door are the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, we're from Jehovah's Witness. We're Kingdom Heart Jehovah's Witness, and we believe, sir, that many people interpret the Bible as wrong.
But you see, Matt and Trey grew up in Colorado, which just so happens to border the motherland for Mormons, Utah. And because of this, they were exposed to Mormons quite frequently growing up, which led them to developing quite a fascination with the church. Specifically Trey, and over time this fascination grew into what was basically a full-blown obsession. There was just always something that drew them to the religion: the bizarre and nonsensical stories told by the church, the overly kind and caring demeanor of every Mormon they've ever met, the violently American values being passed down. It all formed a culture that's uniquely captivating, and more importantly, very easy to make fun of. Now, if you clicked on this video, you probably know about South Park's rather infamous treatment of Mormons, with the religion being ridiculed many times throughout the show's history, and of course an entire episode dedicated to ripping on it. But what you might not know is that Matt and Trey have actually made several other projects that heavily feature or outright target Mormons. These being All About Mormons from South Park, their 1998 film Orgazmo, and their 2011 Broadway musical The Book of Mormon. You see, a few months ago I was finally able to see The Book of Mormon live, and spoiler alert, it was awesome, but my first thought was immediately, why has no one ever made a video about this? And then I remembered the fact that it's like impossible to get footage of Broadway plays because theater is stuck in like the 1800s trying to preserve tradition or whatever. So instead I have to resort to illegally recorded footage from someone's Sony handcam that they occasionally covered with a blanket to hide from security guard and uploaded to YouTube under the disguise of a slime tutorial. But watching this play made me realize just how dedicated Matt and Trey are to making fun of Mormons. So today I decided it would be fun to go through a complete history of Matt and Trey's obsession with Mormons and how it has presented itself in their work over the years, and discuss how it's led to some of their best work as well as some of their more questionable work. Now, I know this video is titled South Park's Bizarre Obsession with Mormons, but as anyone who's seen Matt and Trey's other work will tell you, basically everything they do is South Park with a texture pack on, so making the distinction is kind of redundant. Plus, it wouldn't be as good of a title. So with the intro out of the way, let's get into it. This is Matt and Trey's bizarre obsession with Mormons. You know, Mother's Day is coming up pretty soon, and I know my mom would love to relax and recharge and maybe listen to some music, so that's why I decided to get her a gift from today's sponsor, Raycon. Raycon's everyday earbuds are the perfect gift for any mom out there, whether they're hitting the gym, busy with work, or getting uncomfortably close to the camera while FaceTiming you. Your mom deserves the gift of premium audio that goes wherever she does. The latest model is better than ever with a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets her pair to 2 devices at once. It's incredibly simple, which just means less time spent helping her figure out how to use Bluetooth. I've had my everyday earbuds for over half a year now, and they really live up to the name. I literally use them pretty much every day, whether I'm working out or editing a video or really whatever. I pretty much always have them in. I love the noise cancellation feature, specifically when I'm working out. It helps me focus just a little bit more. And not to mention the cool protective covers. Personally, I love mine, but there are plenty of options and colors on the website you can choose from. And not only do they look great, but they're also compatible with wireless charging, so you don't even have to take it off to charge. Their ergonomic design means they're comfortable in pretty much anyone's ear, and they also have optimized gel tips for a cozy custom fit. Combine that with the 32-hour battery life, and I pretty much never take these out of my ears. So if you want the perfect gift for Mother's Day or just some awesome earbuds for yourself, I highly recommend you go to buyraycon.com/blooms to get 20% off site-wide. That's an awesome deal, so go ahead and take advantage of it. Once again, go to buyraycon.com/blooms to get 20% off site-wide, and thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now, I'm not going to talk a ton about this movie since I've been sitting on a video where I talk about all of Matt and Trey's other projects for like 2 years now, and then LS Mark did it and that pushed it even further down the priority list, but I still do plan on making that video, so I'll save my full thoughts for that one. So I've actually known about this movie for years now, but I've never actually watched it, and when I finally got around to watching it, I was very surprised. Not by the quality of the movie or anything, it's definitely the quality I expected, but rather the fact that the main character is a Mormon. making this the first official project that Matt and Trey would make revolving around Mormons. The movie follows Joseph Young, played by Trey Parker himself, a wholesome Mormon boy exploring the world for the first time by serving as a missionary in one of the most wholesome cities in the world, Los Angeles. You see, once Mormon males reach early adulthood, they are eligible to be sent as a missionary to spread the word of the church, where they travel and live somewhere for 2 years. We will talk much more about this process when we get to the Book of Mormon, as the whole play kind of revolves around it. And if you know anything about Mormon history, you may have immediately noticed that the name Joseph Young is probably the most Mormon name you could have. It's inspired by Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, two of the most important figures in the Mormon faith. So as he goes door to door sharing the good word of the Latter-day Saints, he finds himself in the driveway of a mansion where a shady director is shooting a porn movie. This is where the movie surprised me again, because it quickly turns into a full-blown kung fu movie, and for whatever reason, Joseph Young just happens to be a master of kung fu. This is never explained. I have no clue why he knows kung fu. Maybe the Mormon children have to learn how to defend themselves from all. Upon further review, I have decided this joke will not be included in the video. Now, it just so happens that the director is looking for someone who can fight to play the role of Orgazmo, a superhero whose powers are kind of in the name, since he just fired the last guy who kind of looks like Jerma.
Don't come at me. Don't.
I was also surprised that Ron Jeremy has a pretty substantial role in this movie, but I guess it makes sense given the subject matter. So Joseph, being a good Mormon, doesn't want to partake in the activities, but the director assures him that he won't have to do any of it because they'll use a stunt double for all those scenes. He just has to do all the action sequences. He's still pretty hesitant, but the director offers him too much to refuse, especially since he's planning on getting married to his fiancée back in Utah. So he takes the role. The movie becomes a smash hit, even making it into normal movie theaters and becoming one of the highest grossing films of all time. So Joseph starts to get pretty uncomfortable about all this, but it turns out that the director's evil and he's not going to let him quit. So Joseph and his sidekick essentially have to become the real life version of their characters in order to save the day. This movie kind of moves further and further into absurdity as it goes on, which is pretty typical of anything Matt and Trey make, but despite the main premise being a Mormon becomes a porn star, it doesn't really take advantage of this concept super well. The movie seems a lot more focused on the superhero kung fu action movie stuff. Now don't get me wrong, this movie is very funny at times. I just feel like this concept could have been taken so much further than it was. Pretty much the full extent of the Mormon stuff is the fact that he's uncomfortable during the shoots at the beginning, but even that they move past pretty quickly. But as I'll talk about later, this idea of a Mormon being placed in a foreign environment like this is executed to near perfection in the Book of Mormon, so I don't hold it against this movie too much. But in this case, the fact that he's a Mormon isn't super relevant to the movie. He could have been any super conservative religion, and this movie probably would have played out essentially the same. And that's because this whole movie is really a metaphor. It's basically the story of Matt and Trey coming to Hollywood. You know, the small town kid leaving his town for the first time and getting sucked into an industry full of depravity. They basically just made him a Mormon to really emphasize the contrast. And what's funny is when I was watching this movie, I was thinking about how this setup felt so distinct, but I couldn't place it. And then I came to a realization. This whole plot is basically just a Butters plot from South Park. Specifically, it reminded me a lot of the episode where he becomes a pimp. So yeah, there's not a ton to talk about with this one in regards to Mormons, but there are a few moments from this movie I did want to talk about. For example, it's very clear how a lot of the jokes in this movie were kind of precursors to jokes they make in South Park. The one I noticed immediately is this character they introduced later in the movie. He's basically the exact same character as Randy in The Stick of Truth, making the same sound effects and everything.
Listen, don't get prancy with me, kiddo.
There's also a character that owns a sushi restaurant that definitely feels like the beta version of Liu Kim, although for whatever reason he talks like he's from the inner city, I don't know.
Yo, what's up, homies?
How's it going, G-Fresh?
Oh, just kicking it. You know what I'm saying, G? Oh, yeah. G-Fresh in a motherfucking house.
But you can really feel the humor of Matt and Trey ingrained into this movie. It's something I wouldn't really know how to explain. They just have a very distinct style of humor. And so here are some of my favorite moments from this movie that kind of show that off.
See, when I was a kid, I learned a lot of different kung fu styles. One of the styles was hamster. No, I vowed to my father I would never use hamster style again.
What are you running from, man?
I don't know. I mean, it happened several years ago, but I can remember it like it was just yesterday.
Hey, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm gonna do hamster style anymore.
That's nice.
That's the way it went down, man.
Now, I don't want to sound like a queer or nothing, but I'd kind of like to make love to you tonight.
Give me a sign if you don't want me to do it. sign at all.
But yeah, all around this movie is pretty funny while also being very bad, and like I said, I'll go much more in depth in the future, but for now, let's move on to South Park's take on Mormons. So Mormons have been mentioned quite a few times throughout South Park's history, with my personal favorite being the fact that, canonically, Mormons are the only people who make it to heaven.
I was a totally strict and devout Protestant. I thought we went to heaven.
Yes, well, I'm afraid you were wrong.
Well, who was right? Who gets into heaven?
I'm afraid it was the Mormons. Yes, the Mormons were the correct answer.
Besides, of course, Saddam Hussein, who was sent there by Satan as punishment, and totally isn't hiding weapons of mass destruction.
Who the hell are you?
We're just about to do a play about how much stealing hurts you deep inside. Come join us.
Yes,
Come
let's
on.
go.
You're here forever.
No!
But of course, their most notorious use of Mormons came in the episode appropriately titled All About Mormons. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Armchair Analysis, who made an entire video breaking down this episode. I intentionally avoided watching that video because I knew I was going to make this one, but watching his other videos, I know he and I think pretty similarly, so if I end up saying a bunch of the stuff that he said, I'm sorry. The episode begins with Mr. Garrison introducing the class to their new classmate, Gary, who recently moved to South Park from Utah. He's a true model student, excelling athletically, academically, and socially. He's basically the kid that your parents would bring up whenever you did bad on a test or something. You know, they'd be like, look at Gary, he got a 95 on the test and just won the state championship of tennis. You just sit in your room all day and you still can't get an A. You know, you're just as smart as him. The difference is he actually puts in the effort. When are you going to stop being such an underachiever? I mean, if you even put in half as much effort as him, you'd be easily the top of the class, but instead you just do the bare minimum to just barely scrape by. It's time for you to grow up and start working harder unless you want to be an embarrassment to this family for the rest of your life. You know how parents are. Of course, all the rest of the boys immediately hate Gary because he's a tryhard and is showing everyone up, so they send Stan over to kick his ass.
No, I'm gonna kick your ass. Excuse me? I'm gonna kick your ass, bitch.
Gary is so kind and understanding, he accidentally Jedi mind tricks Stan into going to his house for dinner.
What? How did that happen? He's a really nice kid.
Gary's family is just as positive and kind as Gary, playing games together, making music, and just loving each other. They're simply a happy family. So happy, in fact, that it's almost kind of suspicious. Now, this is obviously a play on the stereotype about Mormons that they're all super kind and welcoming, so much so that it can be pretty creepy at times, coming across as very artificial. And of course, for Mormons, this isn't an accident, this is a recruitment technique. Now, I don't know how conscious they are of this, but obviously to any outsiders looking in, if they see this community of people who are all so incredibly happy and positive, it makes them a little more likely to want to do whatever they're doing. So they wrap up the night with some scripture reading from their religious text.
Now how about we do some scripture readings from the Book of Mormon?
All right!
Oh yeah, that makes sense. So we begin to learn the story of Joseph Smith, the Mormon prophet. These flashbacks are accompanied by an incredibly catchy song that totally doesn't have any hidden meanings that will be revealed as we learn more about the story.
Joseph Smith was called a prophet, dum 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 dum. He started the Mormon religion, dum 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 dum.
Now, in typical South Park fashion, the history section is very well researched and is almost a direct retelling of the story of Joseph Smith from the Book of Mormon, so as we talk about it, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this little disclaimer on the screen. He claims that he spoke to God and Jesus, who told him to start his own church. So, he does exactly that. He's visited one night by Moroni, who's a Native American. He explains that white people like him are the true Native Americans and that Jesus lived in America. Also, that the Native Americas we think of are actually sinners who had their skin turned red by God as punishment.
And as punishment, God turned their skin red. These are the Native Americans you know today. Dum 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 dum.
Now, they don't go super in-depth into this in the episode, but racism is a pretty big part of the Book of Mormon. It essentially teaches that the darker your skin, the more you've sinned. It's called the Curse of Cain, and because of this, black men weren't allowed to hold priesthood until 1978, when apparently God changed his mind. And I'm sure that the black population was super excited about that. They must have been eagerly awaiting their chance to become a Mormon. Now, the racism in Mormonism isn't exactly a surprise when you consider what Mormonism represents. It's American to its core. It's built on the values of a white dude from the 1800s. Of course, racism is going to be intertwined in it. They have to put the story on pause since Stan has to go home, and when he arrives, he's pretty disappointed by the lack of happiness in his home.
I mean, how come we never have a night where we don't watch any TV and we just do stuff together and eat and drink?
We have that, Stan. It's called Friday Night Kegger.
He explains what he learned to Randy, who decides that he needs to go kick Mr. Harrison's ass for trying to indoctrinate his son.
Mr. Harrison's is a white guy, right?
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick his ass.
The trademark Mormon charm immediately works on Randy, and they continue telling the story of Joseph Smith. Joseph reveals that he's found another New Testament of the Bible, written on gold plates in a foreign language. Moroni guides him to them, as well as the seer stone, which he can use to translate the plates. Of course, he was directly instructed not to show anyone the plates because they're super secret.
He found the stones and golden plates, dum 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 dum. Even though nobody else ever saw them, dum 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 dum.
Now, according to the Book of Mormon, this isn't technically true. There were actually 11 people that saw the golden plates. I mean, it just so happens that all these people were family and close friends of Joseph Smith, who stood to gain a lot if Mormonism was successful, but, you know, who cares about that? But Randy sees just how happy the Harrisons are and immediately decide to make their family Mormon. Meanwhile, Gary continues to try to be a good friend to Stan, gifting him a John Elway wallet, which I totally forgot to mention in my last video. Gary then continues to explain the story of Joseph Smith where they left off. He explains how Joseph goes to Martin Harris and tells him of Jesus' second coming in America. And at this point, if you somehow hadn't picked up on the joke that they're making with the song, they really spell it out for us.
In America? Really? That sounds kind of...
Dum 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 dum.
Joseph explains that he needs to read the gold plates, which he placed in a hat with the translation stones, and Martin needs to transcribe everything he says. He's doing this to convince Martin that it's all real so that he will fund the creation of his church. After hearing this, Stan tries to explain to Randy that the story of Joseph Smith is pretty dumb, but Randy doesn't really care.
Adam and Eve lived in Jackson County, Missouri?
Yes?
But school taught me that the first man and woman lived in Africa.
Well, you can't believe everything school tells you, Stan.
The Harrisons then come over for dinner and finish explaining the rest of Joseph Smith's story. So when Martin Harris goes to tell his wife Lucy about all the things he's learned from Joseph, she's not fully convinced.
Martin, how do you know he isn't just making stuff up and pretending he's translating off golden plates?
Lucy Harris, smart, 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 smart.
So she decides to hide the pages that they've written, telling him that if Joseph is actually reading off of plates, he should be able to transcribe them again with no issue. When Joseph hears about this, he decides to go talk to God again, and apparently, God says that he's super pissed off, and now he can't translate from the same plates. Conveniently, he has to translate from different plates that tell the same story, but they're just written a little bit differently. Now, when Stan hears this, he immediately points out that that just makes it obvious that Joseph Smith made everything up. So he convinces Randy, and they're no longer Mormons, kicking the Harrisons out of their house.
All you've got are a bunch of stories about some asswipe who read plates nobody ever saw out of a hat and then couldn't do it again when the translations were hidden. You just weasel people into your way of thinking by acting like the happiest family in the world and being so nice to everyone that you just blindside dumb people like my dad.
Yeah!
Stan ends up having one more interaction with Gary at the bus stop, where Gary gives some justification to Stan about his beliefs.
And maybe Joseph Smith did make it all up, but I have a great life and a great family. And I have the Book of Mormon to thank for that. The truth is, I don't care if Joseph Smith made it all up, because what the church teaches now is loving your family, being nice, and helping people. And even though people in this town might think that's stupid, I still choose to believe in it. All I ever did was try to be your friend, Stan. But you're so high and mighty you couldn't look past my religion and just be my friend back. You got a lot of growing up to do, buddy. Suck my balls.
Damn, that kid is cool, huh?
Now, I will say I really like this ending overall. I think the point being made here kind of applies to all religion, and in many cases, it's true. Religion, whether true or not, can give people purpose and inspire them to live a happy, meaningful life. But I definitely don't fully agree with the statement they're making here. My only contention with this idea is that in the real world, it unfortunately doesn't always work like that. When people take Mormonism, or any religion for that matter, too seriously, it quite often leads to hate. Parents ostracizing their children for not fully identifying with their religion, using the religion to justify being hateful towards others, racism, sexism. These are all unfortunately common practices amongst people who have become more extreme in their beliefs, and of course Mormonism is no exception. Listen to any ex-Mormon talk about their experiences in Mormonism, and you begin to realize that there's some dark secrets hiding underneath those friendly smiles. Again, this isn't exclusive to Mormonism, and of course it doesn't even apply to all Mormons, but the unfortunate reality is that this idea of religion making good, happy people isn't always the case. Like I said, I agree with what Gary says here in general, they just present it like it's the core message of this episode, and I think it's a bit too much of a blanket statement. But with that being said, that's the end of the episode. Now, what's interesting about this episode is that while it really goes in on the story of Joseph Smith and the beliefs of the religion, they really don't make fun of Mormon people much at all. They portray them pretty positively as very kind, caring individuals who aren't easily shaken, With Gary's ending speech, they're essentially giving them a pass for believing an obviously fake story, since in the end, it's the reason they are the way they are. This portrayal makes a lot of sense, seeing how Matt and Trey have always described their fascination with Mormons as a positive one. They've always said that they actually really like Mormons. They're just really easy to make fun of. And if you've ever listened to them talk about it, it's obvious that they're telling the truth.
None of us had this feeling of, oh, let's go after Mormons. You know, they're messed up, let's go after them. It was really like, aren't Mormons fascinating? And isn't this just, it's crazy what they believe, but really, we've never met a Mormon we don't like, you know.
After this episode was released, the Mormons were mostly chill about it. The church itself did make a statement saying that the episode was, quote, a gross portrayal of church history, but that it inflicted no perceptible or lasting damage to the church. Matt and Trey have talked about how after the release of this episode, every time they would visit Salt Lake City, the kids would all come up to them and tell them how much they loved Orgazmo and South Park, so obviously they weren't too offended. And that kind of covers the majority of the Mormon portrayal in South Park. But even after this episode, Matt and Trey still felt like they had more to say about Mormons. They had originally wanted Orgazmo to be a musical, and that itch to create a Mormon-themed musical had not yet been scratched. Then, one night in 2004, they went to go see Avenue Q on Broadway, which they loved. And after the show, they went out with co-creator Robert Lopez. They asked him what he planned on doing next, and he mentioned that he wanted to make a musical about the story of Joseph Smith. Matt and Trey immediately recognized that they had found the only other person in the world who wanted to make a musical about the Book of Mormon, and they jumped at the opportunity. So, they began working on writing a musical in their free time, and 7 years later, the Book of Mormon would premiere on Broadway.
I am a Mormon, and a Mormon just lives.
Now, I want to start by saying that this play is absolutely incredible, and if you ever have the chance to go see it live, I highly recommend you do that, because seeing this thing for the first time live was one of my favorite experiences seeing anything, and none of the recordings will ever be able to truly do it justice. The Book of Mormon is one of my favorite things Matt and Trey have ever made, period. It is absolutely hilarious, so incredibly wrong in so many ways. It really captures that feeling that all of Matt and Trey's best work has. The musical numbers are incredible, which they worked on alongside Robert Lopez, who would go on to write many of the songs in some huge Disney musicals like Frozen and Coco. I mean, this is the guy that wrote some of the biggest Disney musical songs of all time, so it's no surprise that the music in this play is so good. The casting for this musical was also incredible. Andrew Rannells, who plays the main character Elder Price, looks like quite possibly the most Mormon of all time. And Josh Gad, originally playing the role of Elder Cunningham, is also just perfect. So to summarize the basic plot, we follow Elder Price and Elder Cunningham, who are sent on their first Mormon mission as adults. Unfortunately for them, they're sent to a poverty-stricken area of Uganda, where they quickly realize they don't exactly know how to help these people. The play opens by giving a brief history of what Mormons believe, and I immediately recognized Trey Parker doing the narration.
A great prophet is leader of the Nephite people in ancient upstate New York.
What's funny about this opening and this play in general is that a lot of the things they say aren't even jokes, but they're still funny just because of how absurd they are. But following this, we go straight into our first musical number, Hello, which sees the Mormon missionaries going around ringing doorbells and trying to get people to convert to Mormonism.
Hello, my name is Elder Young. Hello, did you know that Jesus lives here in the USA? Read all about it now. Hello, in this empty book, it's free, no, you don't have to pay. Hello.
Elder Price is super excited about his mission, believing he's going to go and change the world. He is, of course, a 19-year-old who's been sheltered his entire life in the Church of Latter-day Saints, so he might be a little naive. He's really hoping he gets sent to one particular place that he sees as heaven on earth. Now, funny enough, when I saw the Book of Mormon, I saw it in Orlando. So I was convinced for like the first half of the show that they do this with every city they go to. But no, he just really loves Orlando. But this just made the live experience even better, since every time he'd talk about Orlando, the crowd would go crazy. So he ends up getting paired with Elder Cunningham, who's kind of the nerdy, awkward guy who doesn't really understand social cues very well. He's basically designed to be your typical quirky sidekick. Now, Elder Price already isn't very happy about this clearly, but he gets a lot less happy whenever he learns where they're going.
Uganda!
Oh boy. Like Lion King!
Yeah, that's about as far from Florida as you can get. Now, being this sheltered, suburban, white kid from Utah, he clearly has some negative ideas about going to sub-Saharan Africa, but he's still convinced he'll be able to help these people. The rest of the family proves just how little they know about Africa by having this random black lady do a song that sounds like it's straight out of The Lion King.
Well, we got Mrs. Brown to sing like an African for you.
Thanks, Dad. That was great.
Oh, good luck in Africa, boys. I've never been, but I'm sure it's a hoot.
While they're waiting for their plane, they start the next musical number, and it just solidifies that Elder Price is a little pretentious and self-centered, truly believing that he's the main character and he's going to change the world, and Elder Cunningham will be there too.
And we can do it together, you and me, but mostly
Funny enough, Elder Price is actually kind of Cartman-esque. He's kind of a narcissist for the entire play. It's pretty obvious that he doesn't actually care about helping anyone or converting people, he just cares about making himself look good.
every hero needs a sidekick. Every captain needs a mate. Every dinner needs a side dish. And a slightly smaller plate. Yeah!
Also, you can't really see it in this video, but I love this little fourth wall break they do where they lower the curtain and Elder Cunningham tries to stay out from under it. It's pretty funny. But they make it to Uganda, and as soon as they get there, they very quickly realize that the Lion King isn't exactly the most accurate representation of the area. Their bags are immediately stolen, and when they complain to the villagers, they tell them that the closest police are about 6 hours away, so they're out of luck. The people of the village immediately go into the next musical number, which is an obvious parody of Hakuna Matata from the Lion King.
There isn't enough food to eat. Hasatiga Iboai. People are starving in the street. Hasatiga Iboai.
In fact, Elder Cunningham even references it. This catchphrase is what they say whenever they're dealing with problems in their life.
Does it mean no worries for the rest of our day?
Elder Price and Cunningham start to get into it and they begin singing along. The only problem is they don't exactly realize what it means.
Iboai means God. And Hasatiga means fuck you. So I guess in English it would be fuck you, God.
As the song goes on, it gets darker and darker with the village people sharing just how terrible some of their problems really are.
We've had no rain in several days. And 80% of us have AIDS. When the young girls here get circumcised, their kids get touched by tongues.
And so we say up to the sky.
Last month, his brother was caught trying to rape a baby.
What? And I told my brother that he would throw his hands for having with a baby.
And where did you hear that?
Facebook.
Elder Price tries to explain to them that they probably shouldn't be saying that, to which they make the point that that's pretty easy for you to say when you don't have to go through what we go through. It really just goes to show how unequipped they are to actually help these people in any way, because the problems they have to deal with are absolutely nothing compared to what these people have to deal with on a daily basis. The vulgarity just gets worse and worse throughout the song. By the end, they are repeatedly telling God all the places he can shove it. This opening reminds me so much of Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, where the movie starts off with no cursing or anything, it's just a wholesome day in this mountain town, and then they go see the Terrence and Phillip movie, and it immediately transitions into the most vulgar movie you've ever seen. They basically do the same thing here with this innocent Mormon boy ready to go help the world, only to be immediately slapped in the face with the dark reality of the situation, as well as basically telling the audience that if you can't handle this, you might want to get out now. They then meet up with the other missionaries that have already been there, and they realize that they haven't converted a single person yet, and this just leads to Elder Price questioning himself more and more, thinking he doesn't deserve to be here. But when he says he's confused, the other missionaries misinterpret what exactly he means, and they go into the next musical number. This one's all about the good old Mormon tradition of holding back all of your emotions and bad thoughts and trying to stifle them as much as possible.
Treat those pesky feelings like a reading light and turn them off like a light switch. Just go back. Really, what's so hard about that?
It gets really dark with some of the missionaries sharing some very traumatic experiences. This one in particular is actually the same joke they've done in South Park before when Kenny dies.
My sister was a dancer, but she got cancer. I thought she had time, so I got in line for the new iPhone at the Apple store. Her very last words were,
Where is my brother? Turn it off! Yeah!
He just said, "Where's Stan?"
But of course, the main topic they cover is holding back any gay thoughts you have, as the mission leader seems to have quite a few of those. They just emphasize this further by doing a tap dancing routine in the middle of the song, as well as doing a quick change into these pink vests. Once again, it reminds me of Bigger, Longer, and Uncut with Big Gay Al's song in the movie. It's just a very similar vibe. Also, it becomes a running gag throughout the play that this guy is very flamboyantly gay, but pretends like he's not. So then when they go to bed, they're wearing their traditional Mormon undergarments, which, yes, that is a real thing. They're called temple garments. So then they do a quick little closing song before they go to bed, in which they talk about how they're there for each other, and they finish it with this line.
We are here for
Now, I definitely read this as more commentary on the real reason that they're there, which is to make themselves feel better and that they really don't care about helping anyone. In the end, it's all a pretty selfish thing just to make themselves look good. So in the morning, they begin to try to convert people once again, but the people of the village are pretty fed up with hearing about the Bible because they've had tons of Christian missionaries already try to convert them in the past. But Elder Price explains that they're not simply Christians, they're Mormons, which leads us immediately into our next musical number, the All-American Prophet.
Have you heard of the All-American Prophet? The blonde-haired, blue-eyed voice of God.
This song really emphasizes what I talked about earlier with just how American the religion is, and it further highlights just how ridiculous it is that they're trying to get these people from Uganda to believe this stuff. The song is basically a shortened version of the South Park episode, explaining the history of the church and Joseph Smith and how it all came to be. And by the end of the song, Elder Price is literally singing about himself as if he were the prophet, further showing just how self-centered he is by having this like savior complex, and how delusional he is by thinking he can still help these people with the Book of Mormon. That's when one of the evil warlords rolls into town. His name is General Butt Fucking Naked. Yes, that's his name. And for some reason, he is very obsessed with female circumcision and says he's going to circumcise all the women in the town. When one of the people in the village challenges him, he immediately shoots him in the face without hesitation. One of the young women from the village named Nabalungi begins to get close with Elder Cunningham and begins to believe the stories he tells her. So she gets her own Disney princess musical number, longing to finally make it to the promised land. Now, the idea of Salt Lake City, Utah being heaven on earth is already funny enough, but one of the jokes I didn't get about this song until I listened to the soundtrack was that she's not just saying Salt Lake City, she's literally saying Salt Lake City, which is really funny and honestly kind of wholesome for some reason. But as you can imagine, after watching a dude get shot in the face, Elder Price isn't exactly as open to staying in Uganda as he was before, and he decides to request a transfer. Elder Cunningham makes the tough decision to go with him because he's his best friend and he wouldn't abandon him. But then Elder Price tells him that he doesn't want him to come because they're not best friends and he doesn't even really like him. This is played like the sad breakup moment, and it really gets to Elder Cunningham. He's ready to give up too, but just then Nabalungi comes up and tells him that she got the rest of the village to give him a chance and they're ready to listen to what they have to say. But he tells her that Elder Price already left, so there's not really any point. But then she asks him, "Why don't you teach us?" To which he basically responds, "I can't do that, I'm the sidekick character."
Oh no! I'm a follower.
But she continues to encourage him, and he comes to the realization that maybe he can do it, and this leads us into our final musical number of the first act, Man Up. He asks himself, what would Jesus do in his situation? And he realizes the answer has been in front of him the whole time.
Man up! He had to man up. So he crawled up on that cross and he stuck it out.
This song is just hilarious. It's all about how he needs to take after Jesus and be a man. But as it goes on, it eventually becomes a medley, including a bunch of the previous songs. And if you watch my Ranking South Park Songs video, you know I am a huge sucker for a medley, and I love this song because of it. And that's how they end the first act. The second act starts the same way the first act did, with more church history being narrated by Trey Parker. We then open to Elder Cunningham trying to teach the village about the Book of Mormon. The only problem is he has no clue what he's talking about because he's never actually read the book, and it's also just really boring. He also accidentally starts reading the part I mentioned earlier about the curse of Cain and realizes it's probably not the best crowd.
The Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them, and thus what?
But the real problem he's running into is that the villagers simply don't care because nothing in that book applies to their lives in any way at all. Which, I mean, of course, the most American religion of all time would have absolutely no appeal to a bunch of Ugandan people. Elder Cunningham realizes this, so he starts making stuff up that addresses problems they're actually dealing with.
The Lord said unto the Nephites, I know you're really depressed with all your AIDS and everything, but there is an answer in Christ.
He also begins adding in some smaller plot points from the movies and TV shows that he's familiar with.
If you lay with that infant, you shall burn in the fiery pits of Mordor.
This leads to a whole musical number with religious figures like Joseph Smith and Jesus being disappointed in him for making stuff up, which eventually ends up including Lord of the Rings and Star Wars characters as well. Meanwhile, Elder Price has made it to the paradise of Orlando, Florida. He's incredibly excited, but he quickly realizes that something's not quite right, and that's because none of it's real. This is a dream. Specifically, it's a spooky Mormon hell dream, which is something they mentioned earlier in the play. It's basically a recurring nightmare that Mormons have of going to hell due to all the built-up guilt inside of them. Specifically, he feels guilty about eating a maple glazed donut and getting his brother grounded for 2 weeks. The video doesn't really do it justice here because it's pretty zoomed in, but this is one of my favorite parts of the musical. There's like a million things going on at all times. At one point in the song, he's even directly confronted by Jesus himself.
You blamed your brother for eating the donut, and now you walk out on your mission, companion? You're a dick!
That is just the most Matt and Trey joke ever. Again, I don't know how to explain why it is, but if you know, you know. We also get a look at some of Hell's most notorious figures as they list Genghis Khan, Jeffrey Dahmer, Hitler, and Johnny Cochran. Of course, all the most evil people in history. But perhaps my favorite part of the spooky Mormon hell dream is when the Starbucks cups come in and start dancing around him because, you know, Mormons can't drink caffeine. Like I said, I wish this video wasn't so zoomed in because this is one of the funniest and most elaborate parts of the musical. Also, these skeletons remind me a lot of the skeletons from the Around the World music video. Just thought I would mention that. But he eventually wakes up and he realizes that he has to stay and help these people. That's when Elder Cunningham comes over mentioning how he has a bunch of new people interested in the church, and Elder Price begins to realize that as soon as he left, Elder Cunningham has actually been productive without him. He's slightly jealous of Elder Cunningham, but he still feels like he can do it. He can change these people's minds. And all it takes is fully putting his faith into his beliefs. He just needs to believe. So he sings a song about how much he believes.
I am a Mormon, and a Mormon just believes.
This song has some absolutely hilarious lines as it touches on some of the more absurd beliefs of the Mormons. That line in particular is funny because they do actually change the name depending on who is currently leading the Mormon church. Meanwhile, Elder Cunningham is busy doing some preaching of his own, and we get to see just how much he has bastardized this religion already.
Just like the way the hobbits all stood up against Brigham Young's killers.
Before Moroni join the Avengers. We must practice patience, lest we bring out the Moroni creature in ourselves with gamma rays.
Amen, sister.
But after his preaching, Nabalungi comes up to him and tells him that she thinks she's ready. She's finally ready to be baptized. Elder Cunningham is a little nervous, but he's ready too.
I'm about to do it for the first time. And I'm gonna do it with a girl.
I love this musical number so much. It's hilarious because they present it like it's the classic first time, when in reality he's literally just baptizing her. But because of how it's presented, it has some absolutely hilarious lines.
And it'll be so good, you want me to baptize me again. I just baptized her.
This song really reminds me of the Christian rock songs that they made for South Park with all the sexual undertones and everything. It's just too good.
I wanna get down on my knees and start pleasing Jesus. I wanna feel his salvation all over my face.
Once they're finished, the rest of the village follows in her footsteps as everyone gets baptized. This also leads into another musical number where all of the white missionaries sing about how they are Africa.
We are Africa. We are the heartbeats of Africa. With the rhino, the meerkat, the noble
I don't think I need to explain why this is funny. This one is just really dumb, but I find it hilarious. Mid-song, they also reveal what exactly the general did to Elder Price, and you can't really see it in the video, but it's a big x-ray with the Book of Mormon shoved into his rectum. So Elder Price has officially given up and begins downing coffees at the coffee bar, still wishing that he could have gotten to his paradise.
Orlando, I loved you. Orlando.
Elder Cunningham is asking him to come back because the mission president is coming to see all the progress they've made and he needs him there. So he begrudgingly returns to the village where the mission president is very happy with everything they've done here. And the people of the village are so thankful for everything they've done that they want to put on a play to show the mission president just how much they've learned about Mormonism. Now this is the moment where they really lean into just full-on absurdity. God tells Joseph Smith to fuck a frog. Moroni comes down from the Starship Enterprise. Brigham Young has a clit for a nose after he cut his daughters off. He's cured by rubbing it on the frog. Everyone gets dysentery and they start doing a whole bit where they talk about how bad their diarrhea is. Of course, it wouldn't be a Matt and Trey production without some good poop jokes in it. And at the end of the play, when they finally make it to the promised land of Salt Lake City, they need to have as many babies as possible to have a big Mormon family. So they have these giant prosthetic dicks and start putting each other into a bunch of crazy positions. This whole sequence is probably my favorite part from the entire play because it just fully leans into the absurdity of it all. Like, it's really the type of thing that you know only Matt and Trey would have done this, especially on a platform like Broadway. In fact, this entire play really felt like it was supposed to be a representation of the actual play, The Book of Mormon, sort of like how Terrence and Phillip in South Park are a parody of South Park itself. This basically feels like Matt and Trey making fun of this play itself. But unsurprisingly, the mission president isn't exactly happy about this, and he immediately shuts down the Ugandan mission. Nabalungi comes to the realization that all these people came here from their rich, privileged lives just to tell them these insane stories and basically make fun of them. She feels like they just came here to demean and patronize her and her people. And because of this, she immediately renounces all of her beliefs. But that's when Elder Price finally realizes what all of this means. This whole time, he was so focused on trying to do something incredible, he didn't realize that Elder Cunningham was actually doing something incredible. And not only that, he was searching for paradise on Earth this whole time, but what he didn't realize is that maybe the paradise has been right in front of him.
But then they were happy and hopeful and wearing costumes. It was almost like Orlando.
Nabalungi tells the rest of the village that none of it's true and that she's given up hope. And that's when the rest of the village reveals that they're actually a lot smarter than the missionaries have been giving them credit for.
Salt Lake City isn't an actual place. It's an idea. A metaphor.
You need to remember that prophets always speak in metaphors.
Yeah. You don't think a man actually fucked a frog, do you? That is fucking stupid. And you all believe this? Yes!
And despite the rest of the missionaries going to leave, Elder Price and Elder Cunningham come to the realization that they don't really care what the church says. They're still Latter-day Saints.
The president said we're all about as far from Latter-day Saints as it gets.
No, you know what, you guys? Fuck him. We are still Latter-day Saints. All of us. Even if we change some things. Or we break the rules. Or we have complete doubt that God exists.
They're gonna stay in Uganda and make this the paradise they've been looking for the whole time. We get a final closing number in which everyone joins to sing together, and they do a reprise of the opening song. They even get General Butt Fucking Naked to join in. They end it by finally revealing the name of their new sacred text, the Book of Arnold, which is Elder Cunningham's first name. And that is the Book of Mormon. Like I said, it is one of my favorite things Matt and Trey have ever done, and I seriously encourage you to watch it if you ever get the opportunity. This musical ended up winning 9 Tony Awards for a reason, which is basically like the Oscars for Broadway musicals. Now, I've definitely seen some criticisms of this musical, not about the Mormon stuff, but actually more about the race stuff. There have been a lot of people that claim this is very racist, believing it's portraying all these Ugandan people as very dumb, along with all these negative stereotypes like the whole baby baby thing, but I think those people kind of miss the point. This whole musical is from the perspective of these Mormon kids from Utah. This is how they view these people and their culture, and by portraying them this way, they're showing just how out of touch these people really are. They're not making fun of these African people through stereotypes, they're making fun of how stupid the stereotypes actually are. And all of that is just set in stone whenever at the end they reveal that they knew the whole time it wasn't true. They were just taking it metaphorically, which ironically is much more intelligent than just straight up believing all the nonsense that Mormons believe. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that real quick, but I'll get to what you all actually want to hear about, which is how the Mormons reacted. Well, based on what we know about Mormons, it should come as no surprise that they didn't seem too offended. The church's official statement would be, the production may attempt to entertain audiences for an evening, but the Book of Mormon as a volume of scripture will change people's lives forever by bringing them closer to Christ. They really went for the no PR is bad PR strategy, as they even used the popularity of the play to advertise the church. The church would buy ads in the show's playbill where they would put things like, the book is always better, and you've seen the play, now read the book. That is without a doubt the smartest way that they could have responded to the musical. This of course did not come as a surprise to Matt and Trey. With how familiar they are with Mormons at this point, of course they expected them to be cool about it. And with that, we have finished our deep dive into Matt and Trey's bizarre obsession with Mormons. So what exactly is it that Matt and Trey find so fascinating about Mormons? Well, maybe it's their wacky beliefs, maybe it's their overwhelmingly kind nature, maybe it's just the fact that it's a relatively untapped source of comedy. But no matter the reason, I know one thing's for sure. We can all sleep well at night knowing that we have our very own planet waiting for us. And maybe that is the real reason for Matt and Trey's bizarre obsession with Mormons.